The snow had been falling since before dusk, thick and deliberate, the kind that muffled sound and softened the world into something quieter. Heavier? Outside St. Bartholomew's Emergency Hospital, the streetlights glowed like lanterns behind frosted glass, their halos blurred by swirling white. Inside, however, there was nothing soft about the night. The emergency room pulsed with noise, machines beeping, voices overlapping, shoes squeaking against linoleum slick with melted snow, and something darker. Blood. It streaked the floor in thin, uneven lines, leading toward the trauma bay at the far end, where chaos had gathered like a storm within the storm. "Stop, please, stop!" A woman screamed, her voice cracking into something almost unrecognizable. "He's already dead!" She stood near the wall, arms wrapped around herself, as though trying to hold her own body together. Her coat was still on, dusted with snow that had begun to melt into dark patches. Her eyes were fixed on the metal table in the center of the room. On that table lay a German Shepherd. The dog was massive, even in stillness, his black and tan coat matted with blood along the flank. One ear flopped sideways, the other pinned flat. His chest did not rise. A tag on his collar caught the overhead light, swinging slightly as someone brushed past it. "Canine Unit, Thor." A nurse pressed her lips together as she adjusted a monitor that stubbornly refused to show anything but a flat, unforgiving line. Another shook his head almost imperceptibly. Someone muttered the word time under their breath, the way doctors do when they already know the answer. The woman's scream had drawn a crowd, orderlies lingering in doorways, a junior doctor frozen with gloved hands, hovering uselessly in midair. Even the alarms seemed to hesitate, their beeping slowing, as if the room itself had reached a collective conclusion. It was over. The woman slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor. Her back against the cold tile, she buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. No one tried to comfort her. There are moments when grief becomes a private place, and this was one of them. Then the doors at the far end of the corridor burst open. Officer Dean Wallace entered, with snow still clinging to his boots and the shoulders of his uniform. He looked older than most of the officers who passed through these halls. Late 40s, maybe early 50s. But there was something steady about him, something grounded. His hair was peppered with gray, his face lined in the way that suggested long nights and longer memories. He stopped just inside the doorway, eyes locking immediately on the table. For a moment, the world narrowed to that single point. Dean felt it like a physical blow to the chest, a tightening that stole his breath. He had seen death before, too much of it if he was honest. But this was different. This wasn't a stranger. This wasn't even a fellow officer. This was his partner. They'd been together for 7 years, 7 winters, 7 summers, countless patrols, countless quiet moments in the cruiser. When Thor's head rested against Dean's knee, eyes half closed but ears always alert. The dog had saved lives. He had taken risks without hesitation. He had trusted completely. Dean took one step forward. A doctor held up a hand. "Officer!" Dean didn't hear the rest. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and stopped beside the table. Up close, the damage was worse. A deep puncture wound along Thor's side, hastily bandaged in the field, blood crusted at the edges. The dog's tongue lolled slightly from his mouth. Dean placed 2 fingers gently against Thor's neck, just beneath the jaw. He waited, counted. Nothing. The doctor cleared his throat. "I'm sorry. We did everything we could." There was significant blood loss and Dean looked up, his eyes sharp. "How long?" "Pardon? How long has he been like this?" The doctor hesitated. 5 minutes, possibly more before arrival. Someone behind Dean whispered, "There's no pulse." Dean nodded slowly, as if acknowledging a point in an argument he wasn't finished having. He reached down and rested his palm against Thor's chest. The fur was still warm. That mattered. It mattered more than anyone else in the room seemed to realize. The woman on the floor looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow. "Please," she said hoarsely. "Just let him go." Dean swallowed. Let him go. The phrase echoed in his head, clashing violently with memories that refused to stay buried. A freezing night in Montana. Years ago, a retired handler named Frank who'd had hands like tree roots and a voice like gravel. A story told over burnt coffee in a roadside diner, half laughed off as an old man's myth. "There's a trick," Frank had said. "Not in the books, never was. You won't find it in any manual, but if there's even a whisper left in them, sometimes it brings them back." Dean had asked questions. Frank had waved him off. "You'll know when to use it. And when you do, you won't have time to ask permission." Dean looked around the room now, at the doctors, the nurses, the rigid lines of procedure etched into their faces, at the woman who had already begun mourning, at Thor. "I need 1 minute," Dean said. The doctor's expression hardened. "Officer, this isn't..." "1 minute," Dean repeated, his voice calm but immovable. "If nothing happens, I'll step back. You have my word." Silence settled, thick as the snow outside. The doctor hesitated, then sighed. 1 minute. Dean nodded once. He slipped off his coat, folded it carefully, and placed it on a nearby chair. Then he leaned over the table, positioning himself the way Frank had shown him all those years ago. His movements precise, deliberate. He closed his eyes and began. Dean's hands moved with a quiet certainty that felt almost out of place in the frantic emergency room. He adjusted Thor's head gently, angling the jaw just so, clearing the airway with 2 careful fingers. His touch was firm but reverent, the way one might handle something sacred. "Officer," a nurse murmured, unsure whether to interrupt or simply bear witness. Dean didn't look up. He placed one hand flat against Thor's ribcage, the other just beneath the sternum, not where standard CPR would dictate. Slightly off, intentionally wrong, at least by modern textbooks. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows as if trying to get in. Snow lashed sideways against the glass, erasing the world beyond the hospital walls. Inside, time narrowed further, stretching and compressing in strange ways. Dean leaned in close to Thor's ear. "Hey, boy," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'm here." A few people exchanged glances. The woman by the wall watched through parted fingers, her breath hitching. Even the doctor had gone still, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, not in skepticism now, but curiosity tinged with something else. Hope, perhaps, though no one dared name it. Dean began a slow, rhythmic pressure with his palm. Not compressions. Not quite. He pressed, held, released, pressed again. In between, he drew in a deep breath and exhaled steadily across Thor's nose and mouth, not forcing air but guiding it, warming it. He counted under his breath. 1, 2, 3. The numbers weren't random. They never had been. Frank's voice echoed in his memory, gravelly and low. "You're not restarting a machine. You're reminding a body what it already knows how to do." Dean shifted his hand slightly, found the spot Frank had called the hinge, where muscle and nerve and instinct met. He pressed harder this time, then released. Nothing happened. The woman shook her head, tears spilling freely now. "Please," she sobbed. "Please don't." Dean kept going. He adjusted Thor's foreleg, extending it fully, then flexing it back toward the chest, in a smooth, practiced motion, again and again. It looked almost like stretching, like something done before a long run. A nurse glanced at the monitor. The line remained flat. 30 seconds. Dean felt sweat bead along his temples, despite the cold. His hands never wavered. He leaned in once more. "Thor," he said, his voice stronger now, threaded with command and love in equal measure. "This is not where you stop." He pressed again. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then the monitor let out a sharp, sudden chirp. Just one, a sound so small it almost went unnoticed. Almost. The nurse froze, eyes darting to the screen. "Did you see that?" The doctor stepped forward despite himself. The flat line twitched, just barely, like a pencil lifted and set down again. Dean didn't react. Not outwardly. Inside, his chest felt like it might burst. He continued, adjusting his rhythm, his breathing syncing with something deeper than logic. He counted again. Slower now. 1, 2. The line twitched again. This time there was no denying it. "Oh my God," someone whispered. Thor's chest shuddered. Not a full breath, but a reflexive spasm. The body remembering something it had forgotten. The woman let out a sound that was half laugh, half cry. She staggered to her feet, gripping the edge of a gurney to steady herself. Dean placed his ear close to Thor's chest. There it was. Faint, fragile, but unmistakable. A heartbeat. "Get oxygen," the doctor snapped, suddenly all motion and authority. Now. The room exploded back into action. Nurses moved with renewed urgency. Equipment rolled in, hands reaching where moments before they'd been idle. The monitor began to register a slow, uneven rhythm, each beat a small defiance against what everyone had already accepted. Thor's chest rose, then fell. Dean finally stepped back, his legs weak, his breath ragged. He braced himself against the table, head bowed, as relief washed over him in a wave so powerful it left him dizzy. The woman crossed the room and stood beside him. She didn't speak. She simply reached out and placed her hand on Thor's paw, her fingers trembling. The doctor looked at Dean, disbelief written plainly across his face. "What did you do?" Dean shook his head slightly, reminded him who he is. Thor let out a soft, rasping sound, something between a whine and a sigh. His eyelids fluttered. The room went silent again, but this time the silence was alive. Outside, the snow continued to fall, thick and unrelenting. But inside St. Bartholomew's, something impossible had just happened, something no one in that room would ever forget. And Dean Wallace knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that this was only the beginning. Thor survived the night, but only just. They moved him to a quiet corner of the ICU, away from the noise and glare of the trauma bays. Tubes and wires now traced careful paths along his body, machines breathing and counting where his own strength still faltered. The doctors spoke in hushed tones, careful not to promise too much, careful not to take back the miracle they had witnessed with their own eyes. Dean refused to leave. He sat in a straight-back chair beside the kennel-style bed they'd improvised, his coat draped over his knees, his hands clasped together as if in prayer. Every rise and fall of Thor's chest felt like a gift being unwrapped one breath at a time. The woman returned after changing into hospital scrubs. Her name, Dean learned, was Margaret Ellis, late 60s, a volunteer coordinator for the city's K-9 outreach program. She'd been riding along that evening, helping transport donated equipment, when the call had come in. Armed robbery, snowstorm, everything stacked against them. "It happened so fast," she said quietly, standing beside Dean. "Thor went in first, just like he always did." Dean nodded. He knew the rest without hearing it. Thor always went first. That was the job. That was the trust. Hours passed. Snow piled higher outside, blanketing the city in white, sealing the hospital in a cocoon of stillness. Nurses came and went. At one point, a young doctor approached Dean with a cup of lukewarm coffee he hadn't asked for, but accepted anyway. "You saved him," the doctor said, his voice low. "I don't understand how, but thank you." Dean stared into the coffee, watching the surface ripple with his unsteady hands. "I didn't save him," he replied. "He saved himself. I just didn't give up." Near dawn, Thor stirred. It was subtle at first. It a twitch of the ear, a tightening of the jaw. Dean leaned forward instantly, his chair scraping softly against the floor. "Hey," he whispered. "Easy, boy." Thor's eyes opened, cloudy but focused enough to find Dean's face. His tail gave the faintest thump against the bedding. Dean laughed then, a sound that surprised him with its rawness. He reached out, resting his hand against Thor's neck, feeling the steady, undeniable rhythm beneath his fingers. The doctor confirmed what Dean already knew. Thor would recover, slowly. There would be weeks of rest, months of retraining, maybe the end of active duty. But he would live. Word spread. By mid-morning, officers from neighboring precincts had begun to arrive, their boots tracked with snow, their voices subdued. They stood in the hallway, hats in their hands, peering through the glass with expressions that mixed reverence and disbelief. Someone filmed a short clip on their phone. Someone else shared the story. By evening, news stations were calling. A reporter used the word miracle without hesitation. Dean avoided the cameras. He walked Thor later that week for the first time. Slow steps along a snow-dusted courtyard, the leash loose between them. Thor moved stiffly but proudly, head high, eyes bright. Margaret joined them, bundled against the cold. "People keep asking what you did," she said with a small smile. "They want to name it, teach it, bottle it." Dean chuckled softly. "Some things don't work once you try to own them." They stopped near a bare oak tree, its branches heavy with snow. Thor sniffed at the base, then looked up at Dean, as if waiting for instructions. Dean knelt despite the cold, meeting Thor eye to eye. "You're a good dog," he said simply. The words hung in the frosty air, honest and complete. Years later, people would still talk about that night, about the officer who refused to accept loss, about the dog who came back from the edge. Doctors would argue, skeptics would scoff, but those who were there, the ones who heard the first chirp of the monitor, who felt the room shift from despair to awe, would never doubt what they saw. In a world that often moves too fast to pause for hope, a snowy night and a stubborn act of love had reminded them all of something essential. Some bonds are stronger than breath itself. And sometimes, when everything says it's over, the bravest thing you can do is try one more time.